Welcome, Sarah. Could we do a mic check, please?
Yes, hi, this is Sarah.
Great, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now live on the internet. Thank you.
Hello, George. Could we do a mic check, please?
Absolutely.
Great, we can hear you. Thank you. And we can see you fine.
That's not good for anybody.
Welcome, Jim. Can we do a mic check, please?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I will go back on mute.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, Harry. Could we do a mic check, please? You're on mute.
Well, that would be a good way of checking the mic.
Now
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Video works fine too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome, Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Good morning, Supervisor Wasserman.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Little rain is nice.
It is indeed.
And for any Raider fans, they're playing at 5:15 today. Even you closet Raider fans that won't admit it. Sylvia, I know you like the Niners. I see 25 people on here. There's more coming in. 38 people. There we go. We still have 2 minutes.
Good morning, Supervisor Wasserman.
Good morning, Sylvia.
How are you?
You know, like everybody, tired, and I'm looking forward to 30 days from now. That's my pick when things will be getting much better. How are you?
Too.
Yeah. You doing all right?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yep.
We're all trying our best.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all you can do. But the vaccines have started, so that's a big milestone.
We had a press conference apparently at 9 a.m. today to show people.
Yes,
Roll out.
I understand that. That's exciting. I heard about Palo Alto, the VA starting those yesterday, and us starting them today, and the second wave from Pfizer due in a few weeks, which is great, and the Moderna and coming, I guess, early January, and yeah, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson, whatever the next is, but it sounds like we're going to be getting some batches in every, I don't know, 7 to 10 days.
And we are ready.
Yes, and we have
to receive them.
2 million people. Oh, I always crack up when I see that I have more people in my district than Santa Cruz County has. And it's different worlds, that's for sure. Different worlds. All right, do we have It's 10 o'clock. Do we have Supervisor Simidian?
Supervisor Simidian is not yet here.
All right. So for those of you that didn't hear it, I'm quite proud of myself. A month ago, I made a bet with Elizabeth Sanford, who I think many of you know used to work in my office. She moved to North Carolina in the county fair. Her apple pie won the blue ribbon. And a month ago, November 16th, I made a bet with her that we'd start vaccinations by December 16th in Santa Clara County. And yesterday, December 16th, they started in Palo Alto, in the great District 5, Supervisor Simidian was the first to launch that. And as a result of that, I have an award-winning apple pie on its way from North Carolina.
And Supervisor, I don't ever mean to correct a colleague, but a reference to the Great District 5 is really quite redundant. So I just wanted to point that out.
I see. Okay. All right. I'm not going to say anything more but my district is number one.
All right. That's true. That's a true fact. There you go. All right.
Thank you. Those true facts are the best ones. All right. Let's get this show started. Welcome, everybody, to the last Hewlett Committee meeting of 2020. And we will open up with a call to order, please.
Vice Chairperson Simidian.
Present.
Present. And Chairperson Wasserman.
Present. Thank you,
We have a
Colin.
quorum. Thank you.
We now turn to public comment. Colin, do we have anyone
We
that's
do.
tuned in?
We do have a couple speakers.
All righty.
The next speaker is Eva Salvatierra. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, my name's Eva Salvatierra, and my fellow colleagues on here are Owen and Natalia, and we come from Palo Alto High School, and we are here to talk about environmental racism and on behalf of our social justice program at Palo Alto High School. So I'm going to turn it over to Natalia, if that's okay.
All righty. Go ahead, Natalia.
Is Natalia using your same?
Yeah, Colin,
Login?
do we have more than 5 speakers?
Let's see here. We do now. Yes, we do now have more than 5 speakers.
Okay, Natalia, why don't you start? You'll be on 2 minutes and the rest will be on 2 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. Let's.
Yeah, hi, I'm Natalia. So the problem that we're trying to address here is environmental justice. So that would mean that no community should be saddled with more environmental burdens and less environmental benefits than any other. And as we've seen historically, Black and Latinx communities are at the highest risk of pollution-related health issues because they're not asked to contribute in these conversations about local issues in their communities. So when Black, Indigenous, people of color are left out of the conversation concerning waste management, sustainability, and toxic facilities in their communities, they're more likely to be harmed by the decisions made in their absence. So I think now Ava has got another point to make.
Thank you. And Ava will have 2 minutes as well, Colin.
All right.
Thank you.
Ava, are you back?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Wonderful. Okay, so what is our proposal? Our solution involves a sustainability task force with required representation of Black, Indigenous people of color dedicated to reducing environmental impacts in Santa Clara County. This will amplify voices of marginalized communities regarding issues such as environmental racism, and therefore the impact will result in cleaner cities, less toxic waste facilities, and a more equitable distribution of recreational natural resources. And then I'm going to turn this over lastly to Owen, and that will be all for our presentation.
Thank you.
Owen, are you there?
Hi, yes.
Go ahead.
Lastly, what we hope to achieve is through the committee, communities and cities historically discriminated against will harbor the power to speak up about environmental injustices that they see and are facing and work to fix them through the government representation under the Board of Supervisors, ultimately making a healthier environment and bettering the lives of people in these communities.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rhoda Fry. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak, and the timer will start when you begin speaking. Rhoda, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Go right ahead.
Great. In the not too distant future, you and your colleagues on the Board of Supervisors will be making decisions that will impact health, safety, and value views of your constituents. You might have guessed it already. I'm talking about Lehigh, one of California's top polluters, ranking number 2 for sulfur, 3 for hydrochloric acid, 4 for PM, 6 for VOC, 7 for nitrogen, and 12 for hexavalent chromium. Please keep in mind that one of the many impacts of air pollution is an increase in mortality from COVID-19. This air pollution starts with the county land use decisions for the Lehigh cement plant and the adjacent limestone quarry that feeds it. Today, I want to share a story with you about the board's decision that led to the demise of Cupertino's most historic home, the Snyder-Hammond home built in 1881. Dr. Hammond was the Sarah Cody of his time, serving 2 terms as county physician. He was educated at Cooper Medical College, which became Stanford School of Medicine. Snyder was the daughter of a California pioneer who discovered gold on the Scott River and was the first person to grow grain in Santa Clara County. In 2011, the County Board of Supervisors was faced with a decision: require Lehigh to install modern pollution equipment or allow the demise of Dr. Hammond's 1881 home, the Sarah Cody of his day. Frankly, I don't know how the supervisors could make land use decisions in Cupertino's jurisdiction. I've attached a 25-page story about the Hammond-Snyder home and its demise at the hands of the Board of Supervisors. Isn't it ironic that tragic that the Board of Supervisors decided to allow its own physician's home to become uninhabitable and fall into disrepair rather than require Lehigh to install modern pollution controls that would have protected your constituents' health? Isn't it your job to protect our health? Thank you.
And Rhoda and Colin and anybody else listening, we do have the Stevens Creek Quarry item on number 6 on our agenda. If you want to speak about that item, I need you to wait to number 6. Otherwise, the public comment is for any items not on today's agenda. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Robert Aguirre. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Yeah, Robert Aguirre. Hey, this is going to kind of echo a little bit of what those Palo Alto students came forth, and we're talking about social injustice and how people are being left out of conversations and they're not able to contribute, especially things that directly affect them. I have been on here many times asking about allowing a commission or something that the unhoused people would have a voice in what decisions are being made that directly affect them. And I don't know if it's falling on deaf ears or if maybe you guys just decided that that's not a good idea or whatever. But this is a serious thing. And I really believe that we need to have something like that put in place where we have an opportunity to be able to listen to the voices of the many people that are in this county, including people that are marginalized because of the fact that they don't have a home. But regardless of having a home, they still have a voice, and that voice needs to be heard. We have, I don't know, almost 200 deaths this year from people living in the streets, which points to many conditions that exist in the street that need to be given the attention, the proper attention they need in order to try to reduce these numbers. And yes, I know people die all the time, but that doesn't mean we need to just stick our heads in the sand and just ignore those people and say, well, you know, they'll figure it out. We need to be much more proactive in what we're doing and give them the voice that they need to so that they can be heard, and we can start to address some of the problems and the shortages that this county is just somehow either through ignorance or just ignoring. Don't give them the proper attention and the services that they need in order to reduce these number of deaths that we're experiencing currently that continue to increase every year.
The next speaker is Kathy. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Kathy, are you there? Go ahead, Kathy. I'm not getting a response from Kathy. I'll move on to the next speaker. The next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Largent. I watched a new documentary last night. It was by the same person made a documentary called Seattle is Dying. And what I would do is kind of butcher up some of their artwork, and I would cross out Seattle and I would put San Jose is Dying. And I did this for a couple of videos online of just the mentally ill and homeless being left out on our streets and just kind of showing the conditions here in Santa Clara County. There was another documentary that came out several days ago, and I would really want you, Joe, and Mike to take the time to watch this. The Fight for the Soul of Seattle. And we need to cross out Seattle and put San Jose. Now, this is exactly what's happening here. I think it is actually worse here in Santa Clara County. It's like in a way, it's like we get left out. They always talk about San Francisco, they talk about Seattle, they talk about Portland, and we're left out. It's kind of like hidden what's really going on here. I like what they did in this documentary. I like their approach. I like how they're saying exactly what is happening. And you guys know I'm a strong advocate for people that are getting off of drugs, you know, that are going through poverty, that are out on the streets. But what this documentary shows is that half of these people are just downright just bad criminals. Okay, they're bad people. Okay, and I want to see those people getting put in the right places so we can help the people that really need our help. The ones that are not, you just watch the documentary. It is powerful, and I'm hoping that you guys can realize that this same thing is playing out here. Same thing is. So please watch that. Thank you.
That concludes our list of speakers.
Thank you, Colin. Well done. Supervisor Subcommittee, we move on to item number 3, which is the consent calendar, which currently includes items 10 through 14. Do you wish to remove any or add any?
No, sir, and I'm happy to move approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I will second that. Colin, do we have any speakers on items 10 through 14?
There is one speaker.
All righty, please go ahead.
Our next speaker is Scott Largent. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. I believe item 14 was the one involving the housing and the temporary housing.
Item 14 is approval of the minutes.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, okay. No worries. I don't really have a comment. I can keep my mouth shut for this one. So I'll wait till the item. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We've got a motion from Supervisor Simidian and a second by me. Colin, if you don't mind, I'll say, does anyone wish to vote no? No one. Anyone wish to abstain? No. That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to item number 4, receiving a report from Roads and Airports. Mr. Freitas, I see you're on board. Take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, staff. Just wanted to introduce this item. This item was heard at the last meeting of the Hewlett Committee with some instructions from the committee to bring the item back. Essentially, what we've done is in the last month, attempted to answer some of the questions that the committee posed to us. And we also invited the VTA staff to this meeting so that if the committee had additional questions, they could pose them directly to the VTA staff. Let me introduce the VTA staff. Is here in attendance is Marcella Renzi, the Deputy Director for Grants and Funds Allocation, Jean Gonzalo, Engineering Group Manager for the Highway and Capital Programs, and Jane Shin, Senior Transportation Planner for the Grants Program. I also do see that Jim Lawson, who is the Chief of Governmental Affairs, has turned on his camera. Hello, Jim. And I don't know if anyone else from the VTA is on, but the VTA staff is here. I wanted to also report out that the the things that we had talked about at the last meeting include the discussion of the ad hoc committee's work. The ad hoc committee is a smaller group of the TAC committee. I sit on the ad hoc committee. We meet about every 2 weeks with the assistance of VTA staff. And we're working mostly on developing some scenarios. And we have asked the VTA staff to support that scenario development with a technical analysis, which they're doing. And our next meeting will be on January 6th. We anticipate the steps of the ad hoc committee are to ultimately advise the TAC committee and make recommendations. Will be purely advisory to the TAC committee, which then in turn is advisory to the VTA board. So that work is ongoing. I'd also just acknowledge that obviously we had a resolution passed by the Board of Supervisors yesterday. So that is some new developments that have occurred. Other than that, the County Council's office has done some work. And I think we are ready and available to answer any questions that you might have at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas.
It's up to you. I could go through the slides again. Please direct me as to how you'd like it to proceed.
Thank you. Colin, do we have any speakers on this item?
We do not have any speakers.
Thank you. Supervisor Simitian, do you want to start? You are unmuted. Seem to be having a little technical difficulties. I want to thank Marcella, Jean, Jane, and Jim for being here. Until Supervisor Simitian is reconnected to us, any comments from the VTA membership representation?
Supervisor Wasserman, I don't mean to interrupt, but I feel connected at my end. Are you having difficulties at your end, or is the
clerk? No, we can hear you now.
And I think I'm visible on the screen. All right, thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of VTA staff, we would like to thank you, Chair Wasserman and Supervisor Simitian, for this invitation, and we're happy to provide any information that we can, hopefully to assist you in your decision-making process on this very important matter. Thank you.
And the only action before us today is receiving report. Supervisor Simitian, any comments that you wish to make at this time regarding this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a number of questions of VTA staff. I want to thank them for joining us today. I'll defer to you or the VTA staff, Mr. Chairman, as to who the most appropriate but I do think there are some issues that it would be helpful to get out on the table. And I don't want to be anything other than candid with the VTA staff. Please understand that my concerns and my questions are not personal to any one of you. I think with the exception of Mr. Lawson, who I've known for quite some time, I'm not sure I even am familiar with some of the other VTA staff who are participating. But if I am pushing or probing a little bit, it's only because I really am as disconcerted by this base scenario, whether it is a plan, a proposal, a recommendation, whatever it, however it is characterized, as anything I've seen in a very long time. I think it is not a document that is keeping faith with the public or the 15 cities in the county. And I'm not going to speak at length to that, Mr. Chairman. I've said it before, but I just want the VTA staff to know that the changing narrative, which seems to change literally week to week about what the document is or isn't, doesn't address the fundamental concerns. So let me just cut right to the chase and ask Mr. Lawson or any of his colleagues, is it the understanding of the VTA staff, is it the position of the VTA staff that funding for BART is the necessary and is that a given over the course of the 10-year period that we see in the base scenario that was issued a month ago? Because in the last few weeks, what we've heard repeatedly is, oh, it's just a base scenario. It's meant to be a discussion document. That discussion document, as you know, prepared by VTA staff apparently, has zero funding identified for 6 of the 9 program areas, but has close to $2 billion in expenditures for further BART extension. Presumably somebody put that number or those numbers there because they thought that that was a given, while the rest of the conversation was still to be had. So, Mr. Lawson, to you or through the chair, what's the answer to that question? Is it your expectation that the BART funding is a given?
Thank you for that. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
Thanks. Supervisor Simitian, thank you very much for that question. I think it is a most appropriate question, certainly one of great concern, not only to yourself, but to other members of the community. And I think on behalf of VTA, we recognize your deep and heartfelt concern regarding this issue. As staff, it is our responsibility to react to the direction that we're given by the VTA Board of Directors. And it is quite clear to us as staff that VTA's first priority is to deliver upon the BART project, and following that, just incidentally, is not incidentally, is the Eastridge to BART Regional Connector. Your point is absolutely well taken. And I think,
Mr. Lawson, through the chair, and I'm going to try and make this conversational, which is a euphemism for me interrupting from time to time, Mr. Lawson, because I don't want these items to go by. So I want to just clarify. I think you just told us that notwithstanding the fact that BART to San Jose is supposed to be no more than 25% of the tax revenues, and notwithstanding the fact that there are literally $4.5 billion worth of other projects in the queue, that someone has made the determination that BART to San Jose gets first call on the money, notwithstanding the implications that may have for other projects. Is there anything I've just said that's inaccurate? Let me start there.
If it would be helpful, sir, I'd try to clarify that, say that VTA...
But before we clarify, was there anything I just said that was inaccurate? I'm going to be very pressing on all of this, Mr. Lawson, because I want it to be an honest conversation, but I also don't want to get lost in a lot of transportation jargon and shifting narratives. So if the answer is, that's right, supervisors, that's right, Santa Clara County, you voted for a tax, but we're telling you now that the first call is going to be BART to San Jose, and that's a decision that's already been made, then please do tell us that. And also, if you could tell us who made that decision, when, pursuant to what authority. So hopefully that helps you clarify, Mr. Lawson.
I appreciate the attempt to clarify my answer. And what is incorrect in what you just said is that someone made the decision. The someone that made the decision is the VTA Board of Directors. They've done that on 2 occasions. And we would be happy to provide you with that information. They do that under their authority as the Board of Directors in setting policy for staff to follow, and we as staff follow that. And believe me, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have to the best of my ability. Let me go just a little bit further and say this. The starting point is exactly that. It is a starting point. And you, as a decision maker, and hopefully a decision maker on our board, which we would be looking forward to, will be faced with the very difficult task that VTA staff and board of directors is faced with of delivering all of the projects and programs in the program, given the constraints that we have. And we look forward to your expertise and guidance in coming up with the right answer for that.
Well, Mr. Lawson, if that's an attempt to shove on the shoulders of newly arriving members of the board of directors the responsibility to undo or correct the work that you've already performed at VTA, let me just say up front, it's not one that I think any member of the board should accept. And if the response is that the BART funding is a commitment that has already been made, could I ask you, since this conversation has been going on for more than a month now, on what date, in what resolution, this decision was made? That's my question. So it sounds like the board of directors voted and somehow Months later, that news hadn't leaked out to the general public, because certainly the folks at the TAC were surprised when they heard this on the 10th of November. Certainly the folks at the at the Policy Advisory Committee were surprised when they heard. So just how, when, and where was the decision made? And if it was made, what was the vote and who voted to do it?
Be happy to provide you with that information. To my knowledge, it was done on 2 separate occasions, one in 2018 and one in 2019.
And, VTA has quite a significant communications function. How is it that information was not widely known?
I cannot answer to why that information is not widely known, sir. That was done at public meetings after considerable
Well, let me ask this. Can we get it by the end of next week? That's a week. That's more than a week from now, a week and a half from now.
I will do my best to do so.
Mr. Lawson, if it was a matter of public record and it's a formal vote, I can't imagine why it should take more than 24 hours or 48 hours.
I'm sorry.
Minutes
if I misunderstood your question, I apologize. I thought you were asking for the legal basis, not for the documents themselves. Happy to provide those.
Okay, and we can get that certainly by the close of business next Friday?
No, you can have it by the close of business today.
Thank you very much. All right. Mr. Lawson, I appreciate your acknowledgement of my deep and heartfelt concern, to quote your words back to you a little earlier. Just so we're clear, it's not my deep and heartfelt concern. It's the deep and heartfelt concern of 15 cities and towns in the county. And I think your staff was on the call that we had just a couple of weeks ago, where 50 folks from all 15 cities rallied together to say, oh my gosh, can't believe that this is the proposal or the base scenario going forward. You know that we have letters that were shared at Tuesday's board meeting from 9 of the 15 cities, as well as from the Cities Association, which represents all 15 cities. So I would just ask that folks at VTA understand that this is a concern that is so we're trying to move this thing along without accommodating the legitimate expectations that people have based on the commitments of the ballot measure, are going to run into some headwinds. And I guess what I would like to ask is your commitment that all of this will happen in a open and public process that is very transparent, because as I say, it's pretty clear that you shocked not only the 15 cities and towns, but a number of the folks who sit on the VTA board who, called in to express their concern. What's the timeline on this?
This is ongoing, as your staff member, Mr. Freitas, has indicated. He is intimately involved in the conversations that are underway. The scenario is as follows. We will be receiving information from the TAC, from our advisory committees, from members of the public. And as you well know, Joe, the whole construction of Measure B was on the basis of a lot of community outreach, looking at projects, trying to make evaluations as to those that would make the most sense. We envision something similar to that moving forward, where the very difficult decisions of how we move forward with all of the projects and programs that are associated with Measure B are delivered within the constraints that we have, within the funding that we have, and within the legal requirements that we have.
Mr. Lawson, I'm going to make the observation as we have the conversation that there are 3 reasons why the base scenario needs to be dramatically rethought and adjusted. The first is, if we don't do it, people will be sitting in traffic, notwithstanding the changes post-pandemic. There will be no congestion relief for virtually the entire county if all of the money over this 10-year period is swallowed up by the BART to San Jose effort. So reason number 1 is the need to address congestion relief throughout the entire county, which was a fundamental premise and foundation of the measure back in 2016, as you will recall. Reason number two is there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that anyone's ever going to vote for another revenue measure for VTA if this is the response that they get after thinking that they negotiated an understanding back in 2016, after seeing that understanding reduced to writing in the Measure B language, and now discovering that there is $0 in 6 of the 9 program categories over a 10-year period. There will not be political support for that in the future. I supported Measure B, as you know, just as you recall, 20 years ago, I supported the measure back in 2000.
As we both do.
And I cannot continue to support these, and I don't think others will be able to continue to support these if there is this reneging on commitments, which now seems to be, according to you, a not once but twice made decision by VTA. And the third reason is it's going to buy litigation, and litigation is only going to stall the congestion relief that you want, and apparently the BART to San Jose priority that you want. So whether it is to actually address congestion relief needs or to keep the continued faith of the voters for subsequent measures or to avoid litigation, I'm going to suggest that this needs to be rethought and rethought quickly. And again, Mr. Lawson, I want to be very clear to you and to your colleagues who are on the line. I do not look to you all to dump this problem on a newly seated board of directors. I look to you all to come back with a plan that fairly distributes the funds.
Exactly.
All right, and let me just ask, Mr. Lawson.
If I may, I want to take exception to one of the things you said. Since we're having a conversation, when you say reneging, I find that I don't accept it. What we are doing is to try to create, in good faith, a program that will deliver all of the projects and programs that have been promised to the voters over this. And you have made the point, we have heard from the cities who have also made the point, that an exclusive reliance upon the funding for BART is not acceptable. We understand that, and we are going to provide to our board of directors, in good faith, in transparent and open way, all of the parameters that are going to be necessary in order to deliver those programs and projects. That's our commitment as staff. We think that is the responsible thing to do, and we will provide that for fair, open, and honest decision-making.
Mr. Lawson, the use of the term reneging, which I understand you're certainly free to reject, is if anything, a modest term for what's going on. I'm holding in my hands the editorial from the Mercury News. I use the word reneging. They use the phrase stunning display of bad faith, misguided. Putting all those other projects on the back burner doesn't come close to meeting the spirit of the measure or the promises from backers. Measure B, bait and switch, is deplorable. I think reneging was the softest word that could possibly be used under the circumstances.
Well, then I will have to take back my rejection of your word.
Well, you get to pick whatever words you want, but I get to ask the next question, which is I'm looking at the base scenario, the original one that was released, and I see zeros for Caltrain grade separation, Caltrain corridor capacity, Highway 85 corridor, county expressways, and highway interchanges, as well as local streets and roads. And I have been reminded at our most recent board meeting, I need to look down at that purple column that says available to distribute. Well, that's great. I can look at that in the year, for example, 2025, and see that, yes, there is a little money left. 47 million out of 720 million. 92% of the funding is going to BART to San Jose, according to this projection, with zero in 6 other categories. And when someone says, well, wouldn't you like to take the money from the purple line, I say, you mean distribute the remaining 5 or 6% that's left? Is that your expectation of what's going to happen? This is, again, VTA's chart. I know you can't see it up on the screen here.
I am familiar with the chart, sir, and my expectation is that it's the starting point for discussion.
Well, Then I'm at a loss, because a minute ago we were told that the resolutions that were passed by VTA in 2018 and 2019 had that full funding for BART as an established priority. Now I'm being told that maybe some of that money might or might not be available, or is that not the case? It's either it is or it isn't available, or debatable, or under discussion. I mean, if the commitment was already made to spend the BART to San Jose money, which comprises 92% of the 2025 expenditure, then it was made. If it wasn't made, and if you're telling us that in fact that's not a commitment that was made, and that money is available for the other 6 areas, that would be useful to know.
I don't have an answer to that. What I do know is that we will have more information about the total amount that's going to be available when we have more accurate information on our sales forecast.
Well, what's the current estimate on the sales forecast? Because it was 6.3 billion, 6.3 billion. And then we got the UCLA study. I don't know what the difficulty was in getting the study made available to members of the TAC or members of the public, but I appreciate the fact that at least some portion of it has now been forthcoming. And is the total estimate over the 30 years some number less than 6.3 billion?
We're anticipating an updated forecast from them during the month of January, which will help to determine the amount of money that's going to be available to the best of our ability.
And is it the position of VTA that no matter how low that estimate is, full funding for the rest of the BART extension is supposed to come out of the lesser number, if there's a lesser number?
The amount, as I'm sure you are well aware, is 25% of the total.
I see. And it's a little hard to know whether the 25% is reflected in the current chart, because the number that's there is closer to $2 billion, 1.9 and change, if I remember correctly. And I'm gathering that that's because those are present year dollars for each of those years. Is that why the number exceeds 25% of the $6.3 billion estimate?
No, my understanding is that those are year of expenditure dollars.
So if they're year of expenditure dollars, in order to know whether they are 25% of the estimated revenue, those numbers would need to be translated into present value numbers. Is that what we need?
I believe that the comparable number is about 24%, might be a little bit higher than that.
Is that 24% of the 6.3 billion?
Of the overall total, yes.
Of the 6.3 billion overall total, which overall total you're telling me now may change based on the UCLA study.
I believe that it will change, yes.
And
I'm hopeful that it changes for the better.
And so notwithstanding the kick in the pants that the economy has gotten from the pandemic, your hope is that the longer view over the full 30 years generates a number that is at least equal to that 6.3 billion or greater than.
Well, this is not my area of expertise, but it would certainly be something that we would hope for.
And just out of curiosity, how do we know that we're within the 25% limit if all the money is spent in the first 15 years? If there is a legal obligation to spend no more than 25% of the total collected, and someone has made an estimate, which is only an estimate, that is all the way out to 30 years, a time period we certainly can't predict, how do we know that we haven't exceeded the 25% number when we're spending 92%, 85%, 80%, 82% of the revenues in any given year? How do I know that doesn't turn out to be 30% of the total?
I have no way to reassure you.
Well, it's legally binding, is it not? Since the voters passed a measure that said we will not spend more than 25%, it's legally binding that we not spend more than 25%. I mean, simply put, if I said no more than 25% and it was $100 a year for the next 10 years, that's $1,000. So we can't spend more than 25%. That's $250. But, if it turns out that there's half that amount of money over the next 10 years, then 25% of that is going to produce a number that's half of that total number. So how do I know that this is really 25%, that you haven't grabbed up all the money for BART during that 10-year period at the expense of other projects, when tax revenues aren't as strong? Because I know you're going to come back in year 30 and say, well, we want our full 25%. So how do I know that we're not over spending when we don't know yet what the total is?
I think that's an excellent question. And my response to that would be that we would look at the forecasts as we see them. We budget on a 2-year cycle, and we try to keep a 10-year look ahead to make sure that what you're afraid of does not in fact happen.
All right, let me give you a break here for a minute. Let me ask Mr. Freitas. Mr. Freitas, if you're still with us, and I think you are, how much money is in this scenario for county expressways?
Well, I'm not really sure what. So the way the money's been coming out is the VTA has been putting about $40 million a year into.
I'm sorry, Mr. Freitas. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm talking about the 10-year scenario. I'm looking at county expressways.
Yeah.
And
okay. So
I see zero. Do you see anything other than zero?
Yeah, I understand. So if you look at the whole thing, we've received $50 million for the first 4 years. The percentage of county expressways should equal about $25 million a year because it's a $750 million program divided by 30 years. So $25 million a year. We've gotten 50 for the first 4 years. So we're running at about half funding right now, but we've got project development to do. So the 50 is what we negotiated and took to the board. That's the money that we have. But over the next 10 years, you're correct. That scenario shows no more money for expressways.
So that 50 million, is that a total for the 4 years? Did I understand you correctly, Mr. Freitas?
Yeah. So, well, it's the total that we received in our first funding agreement. Remember, the measure was delayed by 2 years of litigation. So there's been 4 years of collection. But essentially 2 years of kind of distribution, if you will. So the 2-year delay was they started collecting in 16 and putting the money into an escrow account and started dispersing in 18. We negotiated that agreement and we got $50 million, which is about 6% of the revenue that was produced. The percentage ultimately for the county expressways is going to be about 12%.
I appreciate the thoroughness of the response, but I just want to cut to the bottom line here if I can. Does that mean that we're expecting $50 million a year for county expressways, but, 25, was it 25 million? What was the total over the 30 years, 25 million a year?
25 million a year.
Okay. So if we've gotten 50 million for 4 years, that means that the funding is literally half of what the annual expenditure would be, understanding there was the litigation delay. Yes?
That's correct.
All right. Because I want to be...
Supervisor, I rarely do this, but excuse me. Even though there was litigation delay, the taxes were still paid and accumulated. $100 million was collected. Only 50 million has been given out.
Thank you for the clarification, Supervisor Wasserman. I think you can see where I'm going, which is if this is the presentation that is the foundation for discussion, what it says is for the first 4 years, the county expressway system gets only half of the money that would otherwise be allocated. And then for the next 10 years, it gets zero. Is there anything incorrect about what I just said, Mr. Freitas?
No.
And so half of what the entitlement is for 4 years, and then none of the entitlement for 10 years. Mr. Freitas, I know I asked you these questions on Tuesday, but I just want to get them into the record and make sure the VTA folks are participating in this experience. My recollection is that prior to the pandemic, we had 1.6 million trips on our county expressways every day from throughout the county. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that's our data.
And my recollection as well is that more than 50%, I think it was something like 55% of county residents say they're using an expressway almost daily, if not daily. Is that also a correct recollection?
Yeah, that is a survey that we did when we were doing the expressway study. And that is a public survey that we did.
And let me go back to Mr. Lawson and say that in the Mercury News story online in the last couple of days, they seem to indicate that the pre-pandemic, so accounting for the fact that there's been change, that the two news stations for BART to San Jose that were built at a cost of a couple $2 billion plus are handling 17,000 trips combined in the estimates that were done prior to the project. Was the Mercury information correct, Mr. Lawson? Do you have some other numbers you'd like us to have?
I don't have any other numbers, Joe. The ridership on BART has been significantly reduced by this pandemic.
Yeah, and the information in the Mercury News, and I would like to ask the VTA staff for this information as well, was that even pre-pandemic, the numbers were something like 17,000 combined trips. And, Mr. Lawson, the BART San Jose project serves a perfectly wonderful purpose. It brings a host of riders from Contra Costa and Alameda County to their work sites in Santa Clara County. Also means they leave their cars behind. That's good for all of us. That's why I've supported the project. But to spend $2 billion over the last 20 years, during which time 80% of the Measure A 2000 monies and the 2008 tax has gone for BART to San Jose, and then say, oh, we have no money at all for expressways, for example. And I'm picking expressways not because they're a county function, but because, as you just heard, we got 1.6 million trips a day, and we've got better than half of the population using them on a daily basis. I'm trying to understand the policy rationale for zeroing those out and leaving virtually no money, for that project or any of the other 6 program categories. Is there a policy rationale that someone has articulated that can explain why that makes sense?
What is needed at this point, and I know that Mr. Freitas is well aware of it, is what are the projected needs as we move forward. Those will be included as part of the conversation, and the decision will have to be made as to how much of that can be done and how much of it has to be deferred.
Let me ask you this. How much use do you think BART San Jose is going to get from people in Gilroy and Morgan Hill?
I have no direct knowledge of how that would work out. I don't.
Really? I'm going to ask you the same question. How about in Campbell or Cupertino or Los Gatos? How much use will BART to San Jose get from them?
BART to San Jose is a regional program that, as you well know and have supported for years, is to be a regional advantage, and people will have the advantage of doing that. I can't answer to you specifically as to how many people from what jurisdictions will use it.
Well, Mr. Lawson, here's the question I'm going to keep asking. If the proposal from VTA is to spend $2 billion on a further extension to the exclusion of 6 other promised program categories that would provide meaningful congestion relief throughout the rest of the county, then someone needs to be able to make the case based on hard data that the $2 billion that is being diverted to this single project away from 6 other program categories is going to provide sufficient congestion relief to justify the fact that 6 other programs that serve the entire county get zeroed out. So I assume that we have these ridership studies for BART to San Jose. I can't imagine we'd be spending $4 billion without some ridership studies, yes?
We do have ridership studies, of course.
And I assume that those ridership studies would tell us where the riders are projected to come from and in what numbers, yes?
There is some portions of that information are included. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. How soon could we get those here at the county?
I will be happy to inquire and get you an answer as to how soon today.
All right. I'm going to just put it on the record. I think it's reasonable to expect that information by close of business next Friday. It's more than a week from now. And I think that as we're having this discussion, if people are going to continue to say that this is a priority project, then they need to be able to demonstrate that it's a priority project after having made it a priority for 20 years and now telling people they have to wait another 10 years to see any of their tax dollars used for projects that actually address congestion in their area. I think we need to see some numbers that say that that's a justifiable policy choice. So I'd like to see those numbers at the earliest opportunity, because in the last month that this conversation has been going on at the Technical Advisory Committee, at the Policy Advisory Committee, at your own your own VTA board meetings, at our Housing, Land Use, and Environment Transportation meetings, I have yet to hear anybody lean in and say, let us explain why this is going to do the best job for the buck in reducing congestion as compared or contrasted with the 6 other items that are in the Measure B language. So that's what I'm hoping we're going to see soon. Mr. Chairman, you've been very patient. I appreciate you letting me raise these issues, make these statements, ask these questions. Mr. Lawson, I just want to say, I'm sorry, but I feel like the narrative changes every time we hear from VTA. One day it's a proposal, the next day it's not a proposal, the next day it's a set of recommendations, then it's a scenario. Now I hear from you that it is in fact actually fixed policy. So after telling us for a month that it wasn't really a given, it was just a discussion document, that it's actually a given unless there's a vote of the VTA board to overturn it. So as you can tell, there's a...
Yeah, I think you might have been a little bit misconstruing what I was saying. This is an attempt to try to come to a conclusion about how much money should be allocated where. And that is a decision that is ultimately up to the VTA Board of Directors.
And then if my question wasn't clear, Mr. Lawson, then let me make it crystal clear. Has the VTA board or your staff made a determination that the allocated funds identified in your base scenario for BART to San Jose are in fact a first priority to the exclusion of other program funding? Now that's pretty clear, Mr. Lawson, and there's a yes or no answer.
And what is clear is that was established as the priority. The decision as to where those funds are going to be allocated will be done when the VTA board adopts its budget in the May or June timeframe.
All right. So when you say that was established as a priority, that was established as a priority, did I understand you correctly earlier, for 2018 or 2019 by the VTA board of directors in a formal vote? Yes? No?
Yes. As I said earlier, yes. And we said we would get you that information. Yes.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
And what I think you're also telling us then is that which can be voted can be unvoted if there is a vote of the VTA board to do that.
It is the VTA. You are absolutely correct.
Okay. And I'll let it go at that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson, nice to see you. Thank you for being here. For me, the situation is a little simpler. I think Supervisor Simitian went into great detail. I concur with what he said. I'll say that first of all. Secondly, about 5 years ago, when I was asked to support this, the cities I represent were not in support of it. There was a lot of negotiations done between South County cities and Los Gatos and Campbell and San Jose, Morgan Hill and Gilroy, and 6 to 9 different other benefits from the Measure B funding were identified to take place to help reduce congestion relief. Yep. We talked about expressways and potholes and roads and sound walls and all those other things. As a result of those decisions and agreements where 75% of the money would be spent on those 6 to 9 other projects, the cities that I represent anyway all supported the measure. And the measure went forward. It was 2016. There was a couple of years of litigation, but as I said earlier, sales tax was collected and set aside. The litigation was successful. The money is now being spent. The problem I've got with this is I was opposed to Measure B originally. The cities were opposed to Measure B originally. Promises were made how funds would be spent. That was 2016. We've got a few weeks left in 2020. The projections that I saw them on the chart the Supervisor Simitian displayed shows no funding designated. There are some dollars in that purple line below, but they certainly don't represent 75% of the dollars collected thus far, or 75% of the dollars projected to be collected over the next 10 years. And so, Mr. Lawson, Jim, what I see is effectively next to nothing spent over the first 14 years from when Measure B was spent on what is supposed to be 75% of the funds collected. And there was nowhere in the ballot statement did it say these things would be done, but they won't be done for 14 years. That's the biggest problem I've got is we're supposed to be doing exactly what the ballot statement said. I know with our Measure A with public housing, although we've got 14 projects funded now, we've turned down dozens of projects requests for Measure A money for housing, affordable housing, because they didn't meet the ballot statement criteria that we told the public they would be spent. And there's just nowhere in there that says, what it does say is 75% of the money will be spent on these projects. Nowhere in it does it say, but not during the first 14 years. Do you have any thoughts or comments about that?
Thanks, Mike. I do appreciate that. And I do understand the depth of feeling and the concern that's expressed. And the thing that we're going to have to wrestle with is how to deliver all of the projects and programs within that time frame. That's the real challenge. And there are going to have to be some hard decisions made. I don't think, and this is just me personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of VTA, I don't think that a 0 in all of those columns is going to be the answer going forward. And again, that's just me personally. There are things that we need to do in order to move programs and projects forward. And there are ways that the board will be able to look at it. Some of it inevitably, some of it is going to involve bond financing, short-term debt, a variety of different instruments that could be used. There's a cost to that. We need to understand it. Some of it is going to involve timing of when projects are ready to go. One of the challenges with the current scenario is that the BART project is ready to go. I mean, the expedited project delivery application is ready to go. So other items, as our colleague, Mr. Freitas, knows, are a little bit further along. And so investments will need to be made to kind of keep those moving forward. This is a tough thing to do. And I appreciate Supervisor Simitian's passion. I appreciate the close questioning on this. And I think that, you know, as staff, not as the board, but as staff at VTA, it's our responsibility to provide all of the options that are going to be available in order to meet the will of the voters on these projects.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just feel the facts are the facts, and the money has not been spent, and there wasn't talk about additional bond funding. There wasn't talk about additional costs. There was talk about cities, city councils, mayors and councils. If you support Measure B back in 2016, if you support this, that we will do these things for you, and that 75% of the tax money collected will be spent on these items. That hasn't happened, and in the projections that we've seen, it's not scheduled to happen. I know there's going to be a turnover of about a third of the board members, but that's not even, I'm not saying this board, that board. That's not even the issue for me. What I'm saying is, we, and I'll include me as an elected official, said, hey, this is what's going to happen if you support this measure. And that is not what has happened. And that's wrong. And I appreciate some projects are further ahead and some projects, but the dollars have to be set aside for the project. I'm going to build a new house next year, going to leave the house we've been in for 38 years. It's not going to start for 6 months, but I've set the money aside in my savings. It's dedicated, allocated for that. I cannot use it for something else. I've set the money aside. I've budgeted. I told myself I'm going to do this. We told the people we're going to do this. VTA is going to do this. And the money has to be set aside. The money has to be there. It's not appropriate that 90% of the money has gone towards something that was only going to receive 25% of the funding. It looks bad, and it is bad. And I understand where you are, Okay, you follow the direction of your board. And our staff and administration follows the direction of our board. And Jeff Smith has often said, whatever the wish of the board is, I will do. And that's where you are. I get that, Jim. Okay. But you're here today. So you're hearing from me and Supervisor Simidian, and we did a resolution from the board a couple of days ago. And I'm sure all 15 cities don't think this is right. And that's still to come, but I wanted you to hear from me as well. Supervisor Simidian, any other comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I know this has taken a lot of time, but I think it needs to. First, I'll return the gesture and say I agree with the comments of Supervisor Wasserman, but with one exception. And here's the exception, Mr. Lawson, and I'm just going to say it as tactless as it may be. Supervisor Wasserman says you follow the direction of the board. And Mr. Wasserman, that may be technically correct, but in fact, one of my concerns is that VTA is and has been for a very long time too staff driven, because while the formula for selection of members provides for 5 members of the San Jose City Council who are full-time public officials like ourselves and who have full-time staff to support them like ourselves, the other 14 cities who get 5 seats among them are represented by part-time council members who serve essentially on a voluntary basis with a modest stipend. They have no full-time staff of their own, and they are left to rely on VTA staff. So the organization becomes too staff-driven by virtue of the fact that there are not full-time elected officials from the smaller communities who represent pretty much half of the county, and that they don't have staff the way the San Jose Council members do, or that the Board of Supervisors members do. And so I just think it's time for all 15 cities to assert their role in this and say this is not a scenario that they can support. But I have trouble that people drink the VTA Kool-Aid and all of a sudden think that life will be good. I think what we're seeing now is life's not going to be good if we keep drinking the Kool-Aid. So enough of that. The other thing I want to say is I have already sensed a strategy developing at the VTA staff level, which is to sprinkle a little money around for pothole repair and call that local streets and roads money, and hope that is sufficient to generate acquiescence by the smaller cities. So, Mr. Lawson, I just want to communicate to you and your colleagues that is a strategy that I could characterize as disingenuous at best, and you don't have to like that word either, but that's where I would be in terms of my characterization of that approach. If we're going to get to yes on this, and I sincerely hope we do, we're going to get to yes on this, then it's going to require that we do more than sprinkle a little streets and roads money around and hope that that's enough to mollify people who are upset for the reasons that Supervisor Wasserman and I have articulated. Mr. Wasserman, I just want to ask, with Mr. Freitas still on the line, I'm looking at projects that were scheduled to be part of the Measure B package, and I just want to say I'm looking at District 3 for our supervisorial districts. This is the district now represented by Supervisor Otto Lee. And in that district, the 400,000 people, Mr. Lawson, in each of these districts, I don't see any money in this scenario for local streets and roads funding. I don't see any money for Caltrain grade separations. I don't see any money for Caltrain corridor capacity improvements. I don't see any money for Highway 237 and US 101 or Matilda Avenue area improvements, nor for Highway 237 corridor improvements in the cities of San Jose, Santa Clara, and Milpitas to address mainline congestion and regional connectivity. Nor do I see money there for US 101 Trimble Road, De La Cruz Boulevard to Zanka Road area improvements, or I-680 corridor improvements in San Jose to address congestion there by improving the I-680 Alum Rock Avenue and I-680 McKee Road interchanges, or I-880 and Charcot Avenue overcrossing in San Jose, or the Lawrence Expressway at Homestead Road, or Lawrence Expressway at Homestead Road road grade separations, or the Lawrence Expressway from Reed Monroe to Arcus Grade separation, or the Montague Expressway complete 8-lane widening project that was going to include HOV lanes and auxiliary lanes between the Great Mall and McCarthy/O'Toole. Now, that's just one of our 5 supervisorial districts. I chose somebody else's because I'm less familiar with it. Mr. Lawson, I'm looking at you, sir. Is there any money in the base scenario for any of those projects? That's a yes or no question. I think the answer is no.
I think that the piece of paper that you're holding up reflects no money in those categories as you have listed them.
And Mr. Lawson, the piece of paper that I am holding up is a product of the VTA staff, which it shared with both the Technical Advisory Committee and the Policy Advisory Committee. Is that correct?
That is also correct as a starting point for discussion.
All right. Well, as I say, 1 minute it's a starting point for a discussion. The next minute, BART funds are a priority that has already been established. So we got to sort of sort out not having that one both ways. Mr. Chairman, this issue is not going away. And I hope the people at VTA understand it's not going away. And as I said, if it involves state legislation, so be it. Because we've already got smaller cities talking about what they have to do to withdraw from VTA. If it involves litigation, that will end up being something that impedes the ability of these projects to go forward, including BART to San Jose. If it involves a lack of trust, which so far it seems to, then we can't be surprised that we don't see support for the tax measures in the future. And I hope that we can find a way to deliver meaningful congestion relief to the entire county. That was the commitment, as you have said, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much to the VTA staff for their presence here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, thank you, Supervisor Simidian. And that is the most robust questioning I've gotten in a long time. So thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. And I do agree with you. We want to get to yes. And it is our fervent hope that we do so. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. That will conclude item 4, which was to receive a report. We'll now move on to item 5. And item 5 is to receive a report from Management Audit Division, which should be Cheryl, I would assume, regarding Los Altos Hills County Fire District. Cheryl, do I see you? I hear you. There you are.
I don't have the video on.
No
yes.
problem. Welcome, Cheryl. Just 1 minute. Colin, do we have any speakers on item 5?
There are no speakers in the queue.
Thank you. Cheryl, go right ahead.
Thank you. This is a monthly report regarding the implementation by the Los Altos Hills County Fire District of the audit recommendations that were adopted by the Board of Supervisors. Yep. And I'll just, in the interest of time, cut to the chase. We've reviewed the materials that they provided. We've, on a sample basis, reviewed additional materials from the county's financial system. And at this time, we believe that the district is on track to, it has either implemented or is on track to implement all of the recommendations as adopted.
Wonderful. Thank you. Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan anticipated my first question, which is appreciate the fact and would like the minutes to reflect the fact that the district has either already completed or is on track to complete the items in the audit. I wonder, Mr. Chairman, if it might be useful to ask County Council on the line if that is their shared view as well, just to get that into the minutes as we go through this monthly exercise.
That's fine. And I'm looking for, is it Tony that we have? Tony, it is Tony.
Yes, Supervisor Smitty, and that is County Council's understanding as well.
Thank you very much. And then, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if there's somebody on the call, perhaps from the commission or the district, who could talk a little bit about some of the opportunities going forward for what I'll call regional cooperation and collaboration. I think that the district has been doing some of that already and is open to doing even more. Candidly, I think they got a bit of a bad rap during some of our recent hearings on that front. Is there somebody that I could just ask a couple of questions to, and they should not let the robustness of the prior conversation put them off from a question or two on this item? I think it'll be a little bit easier to get some answers on this one.
For some reason, 75% of our attendees seem to have left, but I have no idea why. We do have a couple of commissioners on. If we could please hear from Commissioner or General Manager.
Yes, this is General Manager Jay Logan and Supervisor Simitian. I'd be glad to speak to that. And thank you, Chair Wasserman and Vice Chair Simitian. I think that from the last report, monthly report, I reached out to Chief Bowden and asked him for an analysis of what the district is doing as far as receipt of mutual aid, and also would be able to portray what the district does in providing regional community benefit for fire protection. I think that's a very important area to look at. So in that analysis, there were a couple of takeaways I'd like to mention. And one is that Central Fire Analysis provides the reality that the district is a one fire station district, and we attract mutual aid due to the lack of capacity to be self-supporting, and we require aid from other stations. However, the district is in a tactical northern location to thereby supply regional benefits to agencies and stations outside the district, such as to the city of Los Altos, Cupertino, Palo Alto, and Central Fire. And this creates a domino effect that provides relief to surrounding jurisdictions. Examples of this regional benefit is the contracting by the district of a full-time round-the-clock battalion chief at the cost of $1.3 million annually, the upgraded rescue Type 3 vehicles and rescue equipment, and additional fire crew mode staffing during high fire risk days. Although some of these resources are for the benefit of the district, these benefits also enable the district to be more self-reliant in the immediacy of an emergency incident. And in addition, these resources are openly available and shared with other jurisdictions and are available to Central Fire 24/7. So Vice Chair Simitian, does that help with that request for information on that item?
It does, and I don't know if is Chief Bowden on the call with us today, Mr. Wasserman?
Don't see him on my first screen.
All right, well, let's, thanks. Chief, could you share a little bit with the committee about the benefits of the battalion chief, obviously beyond the boundaries of this particular district, if any?
There we go.
Sure, certainly. First, good morning. And if I don't get to say it again, happy holidays and safe holidays to everyone on the line and your families. So the battalion chief program was put into place quite some time ago, and it was a recognition of both Los Altos Hills County Fire District and Central Fire Protection District in the need to address the command and control of functions required and management of resources. And because the nearest battalion chief to the Los Altos Hills County Fire District was Cupertino, and as you know, going through Supervisor Simitian up in your district, traffic is just awful, and trying to get resources up and down that corridor become incredibly challenging and have been for the last 10 years. This became a critical need, and it was a joint venture, and Los Altos Hills funded the full-time 365, 24 hours a day battalion chief resource. And it has proved to be an incredible asset up in the north part of the county, not just for the Los Altos Hills Fire District, but also Central Fire District, the surrounding jurisdictions as well, to help coordinate those resources. So it has been a very much needed resource in the northern part of our county.
And Chief, am I remembering correctly through the chair that we only have 3 battalion chiefs total in the county? That number sticks in my head for some reason, but I wouldn't bet on it. So help me out there.
Just for the, if you look at the Central Fire Protection District and the 7 jurisdictions served by Central Fire, there are 3 battalion chiefs, but of course, other jurisdictions have battalion chiefs. It varies, staffing varies in each jurisdiction.
Thank you. And Supervisor Wasserman, I know you're dealing with an angry constituent at your feet, apparently, but I wanted to indicate that the reason I was highlighting this particular number is an individual battalion chief. If you're not familiar with the staffing formulas, it may not sound like a lot, but as Ms. Logan indicates, it's a $1.2 million a year expenditure / contribution to fire protection in the North County and other parts of the county as well, because it is 24/7, as I understand it, Chief. Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
And you know, when you're talking about just 3 in total, that gives you some indication that it's not a small thing. Thanks, Chief. I want to go back to Ms. Logan, if I may, through the chair. Yes. Ms. Logan, in terms of regional cooperation, collaboration, I know there's been some talk about Station 8, which I believe is the station at Foothill Park in Palo Alto, and the possibility of sharing staffing costs there. Could you share with us the status of those conversations if they are underway?
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Simitian. The need for the district to explore with Central Fire programs and resources to strengthen the district's contribution to regional benefits to offset the use of mutual aid is underway. Exploration of opportunities with Central Fire partnerships in this regional northern arm for fire protection is ongoing and is in the budgeting stage. And one of those tactics is definitely the staffing of Station 8. And that's on the northernmost boundary of the fire district adjoining Palo Alto. And what's very important about that is that the district takes most of its mutual aid, and this is through the analysis that the chief provided to us that's attached to the report, from Palo Alto. So I'm looking for, and the district is looking for, opportunities to provide a benefit back into Palo Alto, which would be Station 8. It is stationed in a regional park. It's a very key location for wildland fire protection. And the chief and I have spoken about that recently. It is in the budget for FY 2021-22 for the district, is under consideration now at the subcommittee level with the district, and will go to the full commission for consideration prior to the budget being submitted to OPA, and that will be January 19th. So it's very much on the front burner and in our conversation, and I think it is a key and critical component. And with that, and maybe I could go through the chair to Chief Bowden if he would like to make some remarks also.
Please.
Thank you, General Manager Logan. I'd just like to add that General Manager Logan and I have had extensive conversations over the last couple months, almost weekly at times. And we currently have staff assigned from Palo Alto Fire Department and Central Fire Protection District to come up with various scenarios to present to the respective bodies, Palo Alto and the Los Altos Hills County Fire Commissioners, on staffing models for Station 8. So it's been an incredibly collaborative effort, and General Manager Logan and I continue to work together on future opportunities and just increasing our level of commitment to each other and partnership.
Thank you both. Through the chair, you know, in much of your work, I feel like I need to and should defer to your experience and expertise as someone who knows that particular area well and is familiar with that station by virtue of my time on the Palo Alto City Council long ago. I will say I think it is strategically located in a way that can provide benefits for the city of Palo Alto, the town of Los Altos Hills, the city of Los Altos, and for a wooded area, Supervisor Wasserman, that is probably unfamiliar to folks who aren't residents, but I know you know from the contours of your district that Los Gatos, for example, in the Santa Cruz Mountains, there is heavily wooded, forested terrain up in the hillsides. And so having a station right there embedded, if you will, does strike me as offering a world of possibilities. So I look forward to hearing more. My recollection is that there's a fire protection hand crews discussion underway as well, Ms. Logan. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you. The chief and I are also discussing that and looking at models for being able to do that as we look at hazardous fuel reduction. One of the areas we're focusing on, and this came through the management audit reporting process, and I'm very grateful for management audit pointing this out, is the high fire risk areas up on the western boundaries of the district. And as we experienced from the CZU fire coming through, in that area, that is where we really need to stage some very major hazardous fuel reduction. That is also being contemplated in the district's budget to be proposed and is underway in discussions with the chief. We're looking at using fuel reduction hand crews up in that area, and also looking at various components with Fire Safe Council and various vendors into being able to put fuel breaks up there along with our regular hazardous fuel reduction programs. It's an integrated process. So hopefully that's responsive, and perhaps the chief would have something to comment also through the chair.
And I guess the question I have is, here again, do we have benefit to surrounding jurisdictions? Chief?
Chief Bowden. I guess that would be in the operational area. So absolutely. Yeah. And you know that as you very well articulated, Supervisor Simitian, that Highway 35 corridor is a critical corridor that needs to be addressed, and it does provide protection to Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills, Cupertino, Saratoga, all the way down. And that is something that General Manager Logan and I have been in long-term discussions about. County Fire, Central Fire Protection District has, as you know, funded a program manager for our wildfire resiliency unit. We have interviews going to be scheduled very shortly. We have good response for that, and that is the foundational layer. And we are excited to get that piece in place and start building that program that helps support not just Central, but Los Altos Hills Fire District as well.
And thank you. And then through the chair again, my recollection is that the integrated hazardous fuels reduction fuel break program was sort of part of the conversation with the open space district that is, I think, adjacent, if I remember my geography correctly. Is that conversation still underway?
That conversation will emerge once we have a little more logistics in place with the fire chief and with Central Fire. But yes, the district has been interacting with Mid-Peninsula, and will also reach out to county parks to start that conversation, that dialogue.
Thank you. And what's the thinking these days on the utility of the Arrest, Rodero, and Purisima property that is owned by the district?
Well, that would be that's the parcel lot that is vacant at this time. There was just a hazardous fuel reduction exercise that took place on that lot. And by the way, that was videotaped to be used for a demonstration video for our residents that shows proper property hygiene, property hardening. And when we looked at videos available, what was interesting to us is none of it really looked like Los Altos Hills. So we staged our district parcel for that exercise, videotaped it, used some drone technology doing so. So that's one of the side benefits. But that district parcel is vacant and available, is being reserved at all times for a Central Fire if it needs to stage equipment there, or if that is a necessary resource to Central Fire.
Yeah, thank you. I do think that it's hard for people sometimes to think of a vacant piece of property as having much utility, but the notion that there's a staging area in a key location is, I think, should be an additional source of reassurance. And Mr. Chairman, just one last question, I promise, about the, could either you or the chief, Ms. Logan, refresh my memory about the special vehicle that I believe is rented during part of the fire season and its regional utility, if any?
Yes, thank you. We have a upgrade to a Type 3 rescue engine, which is more appropriate for woolly wildland fire protection rather than the suburban vehicle. And I've probably extended now my total civilian knowledge of fire vehicles. So I will ask the chief to make a comment if he could about our equipment and plans for equipment moving forward through the chair.
Sure, that's one of our Type 3 wildland firefighting apparatus, 4-wheel drive, that you've seen us around. We have 6 of them that we've purchased, and we utilize the Cal OES rate, which is signed off by State of California, U.S. Forestry, local government. That's the rate that we use when we put that unit in service to both staff that unit during high fire danger days. That is a conversation that occurs between myself, my assistant chief, general manager Logan, or the president of the commission to get their concurrence based on our analysis on fire weather and fire threat. And then through that mutual agreement, we go ahead and staff that additional resource and place it within the community to actively patrol.
And does that Type 3 vehicle get used outside the boundaries then of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District?
It could if it was requested, Supervisor. If there was certainly a fire that broke out in Palo Alto or Cupertino, let's say directly adjacent on either side, then absolutely it could be used for mutual aid. As any piece of equipment could be used in this county, if requested. We have to remember it's easier with us. We have to remember it's easier with us and the relationship through this, as General Manager Logan and I refer to as more of a functional operational merger. It's a lot easier with that scenario because mutual aid is a request and it's not a guarantee from other jurisdictions, but within our functional operational merger, if you will, it is if we have the resource, it's guaranteed to go.
Good to know. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to thank you for your patience. I'm going to thank the chief. I'm going to thank Ms. Logan. But Mr. Chairman, I'm going to look you in the eyes, if I may, because I know that as we had these conversations at the full board level, the question kept coming up about sort of being a good neighbor, a good partner, a contributor to regional safety and well-being. And I just want to point out in the last 10 minutes, we've heard literally 6 different ways that the district is already contributing or is in a planning mode to contribute. The battalion chiefs, the Type 3 vehicle, the staging area, the potential at Foothills Park with the Station 8, the hand crews that we talked about, and the open space fuel break program. That's a lot for a small but mighty district. So I just, if it sounds like I'm bragging on my people, it's because I am. And it's also because, as I say, I felt like this commitment to regional safety and well-being did not get all the attention that it required when we had the prior conversations. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. If you need a motion to receive the report, I'm happy to offer it at this time.
Thank you. It was certainly a robust monthly report. And I knew about 75% of that and appreciate learning the other 25. I think since we have Commissioner Tyson, who's been sitting on this for an hour and a half, if he has any comments he wishes to make, do so. If you don't, that's fine, but I wanted to invite you to do so.
Appreciate very much the opportunity. And I'm sitting here actually quite filled with pride that 2 years ago, we hired our first employee, Jay Logan, to be our general manager. And the amount of effort, the amount we've been able to amplify what we're able to accomplish. And then just the cooperation with the other jurisdictions, what you heard about from Chief Bowden. It's very heartwarming for me from a commissioner standpoint. Now I've been there 5.5 years and I look forward to more and better things.
Good deal. All right, I think that concludes anyone wishing to speak. Thank you, GM Logan. I appreciate that. We'll consider item number 5 to have been received. We'll move on to item number 6, which is to receive a report from Department of Planning and Development. So that goes to Jacqueline and anyone else she's brought with her.
Good morning.
Good morning. There you are. Good morning.
Yes, I'll turn on my video. Sorry. Good morning. We come back to before the Hewlett Committee. This report provides an update that was requested from the Hewlett Committee, and so The senior planner, Rob Salisbury, is present. He will present the item. Rob Eastwood, Planning Services Manager, is also available, and Manira Sanhir, Principal Planner, is also available. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob Salisbury. Rob, would you please?
Thank you, Rob. And before you speak, Colin, do we have any public speakers on this item?
We do have a speaker.
Okay, could we please hear from him or her?
The next speaker is Rhoda Fry. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
And Rhoda, I'm going to allow this. You spoke about this during public comment, so you're not supposed to speak twice, but since we have one recording and it's one speaker and it's the holiday season, go for it. But in the future, please speak about the item during that item.
With all due respect, I spoke about the Lehigh quarry. This is about the Stevens Creek quarry.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you for doing this report. I've also submitted my written comments, so I hope that you will read that. Appreciate the deft leadership of Director Jacqueline Anciano, who has inherited quite a mess. My ask today is that a report that was submitted to the department, the Division of Mine Reclamation, be resubmitted. The report was lacking in that April 25, 2019 Planning Commission meeting, which was mentioned in the audit report. I had asked Robert Eastwood about whether at that time Stevens Creek Quarry was in compliance. He said it was not. So I asked that the report be resubmitted to the Division of Mining Reclamation, and he said he would not. The Division of Mining Reclamation has the administrative record for the quarries, and it's important that that administrative record be correct. The audit report was very narrow in its scope, but it did confirm what we have always known. There has not ever been appropriate regulation of Stevens Creek Quarry, and I will say the same for Lehigh. Some other items that I would like to highlight that were not in the report: there's a 55-foot unpermitted man-made dam. There's industrial wastewater that's allowed to flow directly into Stevens Creek Reservoir. Quarry walls are unstable and overmined. Stevens Creek Quarry reports that the only way to repair them is to mine their neighbor's property. Vegetation that was planted routinely fails. And finally, the conditional use permit expired in 2015, and it's now nearly 2021. We've got to do better, and I think that this report highlights some of the issues, and I appreciate that Supervisor Simitian endeavored to commission this report.
Thank you, Ms. Fry. Mr.
That concludes our speakers.
Thank you very much. Rob, Mr. Salisbury, take it away.
Chair Wasserman, Vice Chair Simitian, members of the committee. My name is Rob Salisbury. I'm a senior planner with the Department of Planning and Development. I do have a brief presentation prepared, and at the pleasure of the committee, I'd be happy to present that. Alternatively, I'm happy to simply go straight to answering whatever questions the committee may have.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm sorry, I cut you off, sir. I didn't mean to.
Go right ahead.
I was going to say, I actually would appreciate a brief report. I know brief is a key word today, given how much time I used up on earlier items. I think my own need to weigh in on this one will be limited, not because of its importance, but just because I do think we've gotten a good response from staff. But I would like to hear the presentation if we can make a little time for that, sir.
Thank you, Robert. I agree with that. We each have the 42-page report in our binders that was presented. Any summary you have or any additional information would be appreciated.
Absolutely, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen then and provide that presentation to you. So hopefully you're seeing the slides.
Yep.
Excellent. So this is just a brief summary of the status of financial assurance cost estimate review related to the surface mines in Santa Clara County. So just a very brief background. State law, the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act, regulates quarry operations. It requires both an approved reclamation plan that specifies how a quarry is going to be reclaimed once mining has ceased, And it requires that each operator provide a financial assurance cost estimate to the lead agency, in this case, the county, sufficient to reclaim the quarry per the approved plan should the operator become financially incapable. So within Santa Clara County, we have 5 quarries. You can see that on the map here. We have Kirtner, Serpa, Stevens Creek, Lexington, and Lehigh.
Excuse me, Rob. Sorry to interrupt. I think you might have the wrong PowerPoint. We're on the Stevens Creek item.
You're on item 6. Oh,
I'm sorry, my mistake.
Mr. Chairman, while we give staff just a moment to sort through presentations, which I know can be a particular challenge remotely, I can just offer my brief comments. As I say, as the member of the public suggested, a lot of this is all the more challenging in terms of compliance because some of these issues have been with us for a very long time. There's not quite ancient history, but I'm looking at some of these items that took place in the fall or winter of 1996 before I came on the board the first time from 97 to 2000. And of course, they go back even farther than that. I appreciate the fact that when I raised the concerns about the importance of monitoring and ensuring compliance on the conditions of approval, staff not only responded and has stepped up with specific provisions to make sure we do better as a county in the future, but also has understood that there's a systemic challenge here. And so the condition compliance and mitigation monitoring reporting program, while it sounds absolutely painful and bureaucratic and boring, is actually quite important if we're going to make sure that things are monitored and conducted in the future the way they should. So that was really all I had to say, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that moment.
Thank you, Rob. We good to go?
Yes, we are. My apologies for the confusion here.
Thank you.
So this is item number 6, which is a report back at the request of District 5 Supervisor Simitian and Vice Chair of this committee, providing a report back on the Stevens Creek Quarry monitoring program. So Stevens Creek Quarry, it's an aggregate mine, surface mine west of Cupertino. It's governed by a mediated agreement and a compliance agreement. As noted by Rhoda Fry, it did operate with a use permit, but that expired February of 2015. However, under a compliance agreement, they are allowed to continue operating and they are regulated under the conditions of approval specified by that use permit. In addition, that compliance agreement was recently amended. That required submittal of a use permit application and a reclamation plan amendment, which if approved, of course, would authorize the mining use that occurs out there, and also hopefully will resolve the issues, the slope stability issues, and some of the other issues that were previously raised. And I say hopefully, of course, because that application was only recently resubmitted. The application came in December 11th, or the resubmittal of the application came in December 11th, as required by the compliance agreement.
Rob,
So-
just a quick check. Were you going to show any of the slides or just do a verbal presentation?
No, I'm just going through the background.
Okay.
So there are conditions of approval that regulate the operation of the quarry and some associated ancillary uses. So the current monitoring program consists of annual Surface Mining Reclamation Act inspections, financial assurance cost estimate review, both of those required by SMAR, the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act. In addition, the department conducts monthly boots on the ground inspections where we monitor compliance with use permit and mediated agreement conditions of approval. We utilize a checklist that lists all those conditions and then the mechanism to verify compliance This is monitoring that's done in-house, but was previously conducted by a consultant. And in addition, we provide an annual compliance report to the Planning Commission that speaks to if and how all of these conditions have been complied with by the operator. So there, at the request of Supervisor Simidian, there was an audit conducted to look at how comprehensively compliance monitoring has been conducted. And that audit revealed gaps in certain conditions. There are 86 conditions in total between the use permit for the quarry, the ASA approval for the concrete recycling operation, and the conditions contained in the mediated agreement. Of those 86 conditions, the audit found that 7 of those conditions have not been sufficiently tracked. Those conditions generally fall into 3 categories: annual noise monitoring, use permit condition 21E requires twice annual noise testing. There's a condition related to truck traffic and reporting. Use permit condition of approval 44 requires the operator to submit annual truck traffic data. And then there's a mediated agreement condition number 34 that limits truck trips to 1,300 per day. And then there's a series of conditions in the use permit that allow the operator to rent out quarrying equipment when it's not in use, and it provides a framework that by which that ancillary rental use can be conducted. So these are the 3 broad areas that the audit found weren't being sufficiently tracked and monitored. So I'll just briefly go through each of these here. So the noise monitoring, the condition requires twice annual noise monitoring. So the department has been discussing this requirement with the Department of Environmental Health staff, and either environmental health staff will conduct that monitoring, or that monitoring will be conducted by a consultant hired by the planning department and using funds provided by the operator. And we anticipate that noise monitoring will commence in spring of 2021. With respect to the truck traffic monitoring, the department actually had identified this gap in advance of the audit. And in your packet, there's a letter dated June of 2020 sent to the operator, reminding them of the requirements of this truck traffic data. And hopefully you noted that the condition does specify that the specific truck traffic data is proprietary and general trends up or down only are to be reported. So in compliance with that direction by the department, the operator submitted data for the past 4 years. And it showed compliance with that 1,300 truck trip per day limit for all the years of data supplied. And the department will be reporting on general trends in this truck traffic data during the next annual report. So then the last general area was the ancillary truck and equipment rental use. And this has been a bit trickier. There was a board approved resolution that was approved on December 17th, 1996. And with this resolution, the board approved a list of classes of equipment, not a numeric inventory, and affirmed that the quarry may rent out trucks and equipment when it's not in quarrying use. However, as you presumably noted in the staff report, at the moment, we have not been able to locate the inventory that was specifically associated with that resolution as an exhibit. However, we did find a list of classes of equipment associated with earlier discussions that the board had on this topic back in 1986. So we do feel confident that that was the list of classes of equipment referenced by the board in the resolution. So as I mentioned, it's not really an inventory per se, it's just a list of 22 broad classes of equipment that are typical for quarrying use. And it simply says when equipment of those types is not being used by the quarry, it can be rented out. That being said, the department is going to request a list of the operator of the equipment used on site, verify that it does fall within those classes of equipment. And should there be any equipment that doesn't fall within those broad classes, the department will ask the operator to clarify what the purpose of that equipment is and whether it's being used or whether it's being rented out under these conditions. Additionally, I would just like to mention that the staff does inspect the quarry on an ongoing basis, monthly, and staff has never observed equipment that is not typically used in quarrying operation. Although, of course, now that we have that inventory or the list of classes of equipment, we will be using that henceforth when we conduct our monthly inspections. So lastly, I would just like to take the opportunity to point out that the department is undergoing a broader effort to improve condition status tracking and records retention. Several years back, the department acquired and set up a new permit processing system called Insight. And we are currently designing and implementing improvements to the system that will allow the individual compliance status of conditions to be tracked, record the date on which compliance was achieved, and store permanently the documents that prove that compliance. So these improvements will greatly improve the department's ability to individually monitor, track, and record condition compliance. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have, and I do apologize for my confusion there at the beginning. Thank you.
No problem, Mr. Salisbury. Supervisor Smitty, any questions or comments?
No, thank you. Very helpful, and just again, appreciate the responsiveness on the specific issue of compliance in this particular case, and then the further follow-up to ensure that we had systems in place more broadly that would try to mitigate the potential for the same challenges in other sites where we have a similar obligation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smithian. Supervisor Smithian. And we heard from the public already. We will consider item 6 received. Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 7, which has to do with Surface Mining Reclamation Act. Receiving a report as well. Jacqueline?
Yes, thank you. I will turn it back over to Mr. Salisbury. This is the report he had started on.
Yes.
And so this is item number 7. Mr. Salisbury, if you would please proceed with the outline relative to the quarries and the face.
And Rob, I'm going to interrupt you one more time. Do we have any public speakers on this item, Colin?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. We may hear from them.
The next speaker is Rhoda Fry. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, I just want to thank the planning department and Rob Salisbury for really starting to take a good look at FACE, the financial assurance cost estimate, and it's really important that the FACE be correct so that if any of these mines go belly up, that there's sufficient money in reserves to reclaim them. And I'm really very grateful, and it's the best holiday present that we could get, I think. Of course, you know what my focus is. But anyway, I wish you very happy holidays, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rhoda. Colin, any other speakers?
That concludes our speakers.
Thank you. All right, Rob, back to you, and I'll try and mute these dogs that have their own comments.
Real quick, Supervisor Wasserman, I know you have 2 items behind this. We think the information is pretty straightforward. Your choice if you'd like the presentation or we can just go forward as is.
Supervisor Smithian.
Thanks. I think we can forego the presentation, but I would like to ask for an update on, first of all, I thought for Ms. Fry's comments about the importance of this were short, sweet, to the point, and spot on. So I'll just say, associate myself with that. I do understand that there was some late-breaking developments in terms of the Stevens Creek site on Friday. And I wonder if staff, Ms. Reeswood, if you could respond to my interest there and what happened. It's my short question.
Go ahead. Robert Salisbury's in the best position to answer that. Go ahead, Robert.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Simitian. Yeah, so Friday, Stevens Creek Quarry provided a response, a revised financial assurance cost estimate. They had originally submitted it and the county had declared it inadequate. And as they were required to do under their statutory obligations, they did provide a revised face Friday, December 11th. That is currently under review by the department.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to overburden staff, so perhaps the best bet would be to say if we could get an off-agenda report on following the review by staff of the documents from Stevens Creek, that would be helpful, and then they could share it with members of the committee or the board. And of course, our off-agenda reports are public documents, so that would serve the purpose, and we wouldn't have to ask them back to the committee again at a subsequent time. If that works for you, Mr. Chairman, and for staff, that would be, I think, the best path forward.
Good idea. Thank you. It does agree. I do agree.
And if I may, good morning, Chair and Vice Chair. I just wanted to add that we also have an update for Lehigh. On Monday, we deemed their face adequate, and that adequacy letter has been attached, yellow tagged to the staff report as well. So that was.
You said you found it to be adequate?
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
And through the chair, if I could just clarify, Manir Sandir is correct. The one clarification there is we deemed their original financial assurance cost estimate inadequate, provided comments, and they resubmitted a financial assurance cost estimate that answered our questions. It did represent an increase of about $2 million from their original financial assurance cost estimate. And they addressed our concerns satisfactorily. And so we, as Mayor said, we deemed that revised face adequate. And it's now with the Department of Mine Reclamation for their 45 days. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, Jacqueline, from your department? Nope. Supervisor Simitian, any closing comments on this item?
No, sir. Thank you again to all parties.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. We'll consider item 7 received. We'll move on to item 8.
Yes, thank you. Item 8 is a report that we would like to present relative to changing and modifying our zoning classifications, our land use classifications relative to the allowance of nurseries and the sale and cultivation of ornamental trees, plants, shrubs. And so to present today is Joanna Wilk, Associate Planner, along with Michael Meehan, Senior Planner, and I believe also our Zoning Administrator, Lisa McKyle, who is operating in the zoning administrative role, but she is a principal planner. She is also with us today.
Welcome. And before we start this presentation, do we have any speakers on this item, Colin?
There are no speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take it away. Joanna?
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Joanna Wilk again, Associate Planner with the Department of Planning and Development. As Director Anciano had mentioned, that Michael Meehan and Lisa McGill are also here to help answer questions at the end of this presentation. And this is agenda item number 8, the proposed zoning ordinance amendments pertaining to nurseries. And I'd like to add that there's some changes to the presentation as opposed to the one that was uploaded to the agenda. So it's just a little different. So the department first became aware of issues with the current nursery regulations when the Code Enforcement Division began citing a total of 24 unpermitted contractors' facilities in the rural zones, which are primarily in South County. So the contractors' facilities are not permitted in these rural zones. However, nurseries are, and there's some crossover in the definition in our zoning ordinance. So what these property owners would do is they would alter their business operations so it would fit into that nursery classification in our zoning ordinance. And as you can see on the slide, that nurseries in these zones are permitted by right, meaning there's no planning review involved. So some of the overlap is that both operations include the use of landscaping equipment, as well as storage of materials such as piles of soil. So because we have the overlap in these definitions and there's a lack of planning review for the nursery operations, this results in confusion between the property owners and staff, as well as overall delayed compliance for the property owners.
Joanna, I'm going to interrupt for just 1 second. I've got your report here that I've gone through. You mentioned there were some changes. I printed out the report a day or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me as you go through this what changes you made so I can note them on here?
Sure, I will. This slide is the same.
Thank you.
Okay. So to address this misuse, staff is proposing that there be some type of planning review for nurseries, either a planning clearance or a special permit. And I'll go over when one would be required over the other in the next slide. Staff is also proposing that we introduce language into the supplemental use regulation chapter, so it furthers clarify what a legitimate nursery operation is within the county. So another important component of these revisions is resource preservation in the rural-based districts. So these nurseries typically include pavement or base rock to create these display areas for the plants. And once this type of display area is created, it eliminates that area for the future use of soil-dependent agriculture. So with this in mind, staff proposes that nurseries which develop 10% or less of existing farmland go through a planning clearance process. Now, this was different than what was originally proposed in the staff report. Staff had originally proposed that if 10% or less of the entire property was converted into a nursery use, then the planning clearance would be required. But after further discussion with the Department of Agriculture, we decided that it was more beneficial to focus on the conversion of soils, not the entire property, since that's the resource we're focusing on conserving. So controversially, if the over 10% of existing farmland soils is converted due to the development of the nursery, then a little bit more in-depth review process would be required, a special permit. So this type of review makes sure that the nursery aligns with the policies for the rural-based district, and it also includes a public hearing process with the zoning administrator. Here we have two tables, and this is a new slide that we introduced.
Joanna, it's Mike again. If you can go back one slide, please.
Sure.
So on mine, I've got 10% or less of property. You're saying it's 10% or less of existing farmlands. So that's one of the changes that you made?
Correct. Yeah, as we mentioned, we changed this after we discussed with the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, I'm just if you can, as you go through any of the minute changes or major changes that you made, please just let me know.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So as I mentioned, this is a new slide that we introduced. So it differentiates the current regulations, the current processes between the proposed regulations and our proposed processes. So currently nurseries are bifurcated into two subtypes, either retail or wholesale. Retail meaning they're selling the plants to general members of the public. Wholesale means they're selling the plants to landscape contractors. This differentiation between the two subtypes is also hard to enforce, and it's a little bit mucky on proving whether you're one or the other. Additionally, the permitting process is pretty polarized. If you are a retail nursery, then you go through the use permit process, which is an in-depth review by the planning department. However, if you're wholesale, no review at all. So staff is proposing to sort of split the difference in the planning process review. If you are that limited type of nursery, meaning you're converting less than 10% of existing farmland soils, then you go through the streamlined, affordable planning clearance process. If you're converting over 10% of the existing farmland soils, then you would require the special permit. It's a little bit more expensive and requires a little bit more review, but it's still much an improvement from that use permit review process. So after staff develops formal amendments, since today we're just going over what kind of direction that we're proposing to go in, we will take them to the public and conduct appropriate public outreach, take those amendments to the San Martin Planning Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission for their recommendation, and then ultimately to the board for their adoption. In conclusion, staff recommends that the committee receive the report from the department relating to zoning ordinance amendments for the land use classification of nurseries. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you, and staff is available if the committee has any questions.
Thank you very much, Joanna.
No problem.
Go to Smitty, and I'll start with you, and then I've got questions.
I'll defer to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I've had quite a bit of airtime today.
No worries. It's all included in the same fee. All right. Joanna, I appreciate I'll call it the compromise, the proposal that you've got with, instead of just by right and by use permit, going to the planning clearance and the special. I think that's an excellent move in the right direction. I understand it's the overall goal to preserve farmland, but if not farmland, then nursery, which is certainly helpful, maybe not edible, but it's nice to have nursery, the way it helps our air and provides another source of revenue for people with land to survive. I appreciate that a lot. I think the fees, the 520 and the 2,500, are reasonable and a whole lot better than the 14,000 time consuming that was required before. So I applaud the planning department for those suggestions and changes. I'll be very interested in the feedback that you get when you do your public outreach as far as the 10% number. I appreciate the change you made from the 10% of the entire parcel to being 10% of the ag land. That certainly is important. So I appreciate overall the direction that you're going and all that you've done. And like I said, I look forward to public outreach. The concern I have, I guess, is that 10% number might be a shade low. Mm-hmm. To facilitate or encourage people going to nursery rather than any other type of use that might not protect ag or protect nursery and lead to more development. I do have a few questions I'd like to ask you and those with you here today. And thank you, Lisa and Michael, for being here as well. While I agree with the idea of combining wholesale and retail nurseries into a single classification, I'd like to better understand the proposed threshold between a planning clearance and a special permit. Specifically, when you include the 10% paved areas, at my home recently, I've got into permeable surfaces such as artificial turf, permeable asphalt, things like that. And I've learned a great deal from the Los Gatos Planning Department because the property happened to be in the town boundaries. So what areas would be included in the 10% paved areas beyond the obvious, such as concrete and asphalt? Although I know there are some concretes and asphalts now and that are considered permeable, but certainly not the same as not being there. For instance, gravel roads with or without base rock, buildings, greenhouses, material stockpiles, such as soil, gravel, peat, sand, turf. Do some or all of these count as paved when you're doing the 10% calculation?
Sure. So as noted on the bottom of this slide here, we did take into consideration that the inclusion of base rock or drain rock be included as a development, with the intent being that if it's something that you could not later on remove or later on reuse for soil dependent agriculture. As far as going into a little bit more specific of what would be required, what would be considered development or not development, that's something we can look further into when we draft the formal amendments. And I would also like to give Michael Meehan, Senior Planner, an opportunity to speak to this topic, since I know this is something he was involved in as well.
Sure, welcome, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Michael Meehan, Senior Planner. The one comment I would add to Joanna's is that, as noted here, soil-dependent greenhouses would not count as development. So very common in this county through nursery operations as well as others, we have hoop houses or greenhouses, which are to some extent structures, somewhat temporary, and those structures have the soil underneath. And again, they may be removed to preserve the soil resource base that's there. Similarly, something that I've been learning more about from our ag department and nursery operations operators is the use of a heavy duty ground cover tarp that is commonly used in nursery operations. This is permeable. It retains the soil base underneath while also serving as a weed block. It's not necessarily always the best solution as compared to decomposed granite or base rock. However, that's another situation where we would have something covering the ground that was temporary and upon removal would retain the ability for cultivation of food crops or row crops in the future. So that's just, I think, an important headline in terms of how we're looking at this distinction, is that we want to make it as easy as possible for nurseries to establish or expand when we can rest assured that new loss of farmland will not occur. And we just want a little bit more scrutiny when that farmland is being proposed as a conversion. We haven't maybe stated clearly enough that a third goal of this is not only to address the challenges, but really to support nursery crop production in our county. It's a vital component of our ag economy, and certainly not to increase cost or complexity unnecessarily for existing or future nursery operations. And that's a goal that we're trying to balance with these other challenges that Joanna identified.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, I appreciate the attitude of the department that we're trying to make these work, because nurseries are needed. Nurseries I certainly would not consider as development. Nurseries, as you see in your picture there, are green. And while they're not tomatoes and mushrooms and all the rest that we're trying to preserve, I think it's kind of a compromise in between full out ag and development. And we have dozens and dozens of nurseries, permitted, unpermitted, in Santa Clara County, especially in my district, and helping them get legit, in such a way that it is still feasible for them to operate. You know, for instance, if we were at outdoor dining only for restaurants, that would, you know, short term, maybe they can survive, but long term, they can't. Going back into the 10% threshold being enough or not, I've got two examples of actual nurseries where the developed versus non-developed areas are roughly measured, and they show about 37% and 61% of the total nurseries developed. So I'd like staff, like I said before, to explore the 10% threshold as you go forward and reach out and hold those public meetings. And also as you analyze existing nurseries. I understand existing nurseries will be grandfathered in. I don't know, you know, I've got here in your report, there are 24 unpermitted. Let's see, I guess they've been cited over the last 3 years. So I don't know how many unpermitted still exist, but I'm not really looking to close down existing buildings. I'm looking to try and encourage them to conform more, if you will, whether or not that's called grandfathered in or not. But a couple of nurseries I looked at, they show 37 and 61% of the total nursery area developed. So I'd like staff to explore, again, the 10% threshold to make sure it works for actual nurseries. We can do one thing in the office and another is out there in the real world. And again, a lot of that depends on what we call paved and not paved, perhaps using the term developed versus not developed. But if you could please look at the 10% threshold to make sure it works for actual nurseries, and then figure out whether a planning clearance is sufficient in most cases, and when a special permit would really be needed. It seems to me that nurseries likely require much more than that 10% area to be developed to actually function as a nursery. And I've visited several nurseries, and I know there are some that have dirt on the ground. There are some that have concrete on the ground. I see that as totally different. but there's also reasons in some instances where things can be developed, things can be grown right on the dirt or in the dirt versus needing some sort of barrier between them. Please clarify how the total land area is calculated. For example, if there's nursery land use on part of a property and some other predominant land use on the rest of the property, how would the nursery's total area be calculated? And that was a question I had before, but I think in your presentation, you're saying now that you're only going to be looking at areas that are not farmland, but I'm still concerned about the calculation. And I think some more research, for lack of a better term, of actual nurseries actually walking boots on the ground when this COVID allows us to do more boots on the ground would be necessary. Because I think it's important that we look at, we can theorize about how a nursery should be, but with none of us being actual nursery operators and not knowing all the obstacles that come with being a nursery operator, be that taking the product to an area, removing the product from that area where it's grown to an area where it's sold. To get from point A to point B, you're going to need ground covering of some sort. And I just would encourage planning staff, as you do your public outreach, to visit more and more nurseries and look at existing nurseries and see if they would fit in our parameters. I don't want to ultimately bring forth parameters that are unfeasible. Lastly, I think the goal should be to streamline and incentivize more nurseries, both big and small, and despite the development and paving of land they require, because nurseries are an important part of our ag community. And I think our farm people and the ag community would all agree that nurseries, while not ag, growing products that can be eaten, are still an important part of the agricultural community. Thank you very much. Supervisor Simitian, do you have any comments? And then staff, planning staff, Joanna, Michael, do you have any responses to anything I said? Sorry to have rambled.
No worries. Just quickly, I thank you for adding your comments. We will definitely look into exploring that 10% threshold and see what's appropriate for real nurseries that are existing within the county, because it's our intent as well. We don't want to make it too restrictive to where we're preventing nurseries from operating. We're just kind of focusing on the preservation of our resources and also making sure we don't have these bad actors where it's really a landscaping contractor who's trying to be a nursery. So we definitely will take into consideration your comments.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Supervisor Simitian, anything else?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I look forward to what you hear back in the next report on this. That concludes item number 8. We now move on to 9, which is our parks. And I think I saw Director Rocha here.
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, Chair Wasserman and committee. The department's excited to bring this plan amendment before the committee today. This master plan amendment not only leads towards public access to the Sulphur Spring property, which is associated with Joseph D. County Park, but it also provides a recreational experience that is not found anywhere within our 55,000 acres and 28 park regional park system. The plan recommends backcountry camping in the setting of our largest county park, Joseph D. Grant. As you'll see in the brief presentation, the Sulphur Springs property being part of the Grant Park lends itself well to making this a wonderful setting for backcountry and to bring backcountry camping experience to our regional park system. Today I have Senior Planner Kimberly Berceau, along with a member of our consultant team, RRM Design, April Miller, to give a brief presentation, and our Principal Planner, Jeremy Farr, is also here to answer any questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kim for a brief presentation.
Thank you. And Kim, before you start, Colin, do we have any speakers on this item?
There are no speakers.
Thank you. Kim, welcome.
Great, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, supervisors and members of the committee. Again, I'm Kimberly Berceau, Senior Planner. April's going to be doing a screen share for the PowerPoint, but I'll go ahead and get started. In 2018, the County Parks Department began planning for the public access and use of the Sulphur Springs Ranch property. This master plan amendment builds upon the planning work completed in the 1993 Joseph D. Grant County Park Master Plan. by providing recommendations to facilitate the opening of the Sulphur Springs Ranch, including identifying areas for public use such as trails, service roads, parking, staging, and backcountry camping. Joseph D. Grant County Park is the largest county park in the County of Santa Clara's park system, located east of downtown San Jose in the foothills of eastern Santa Clara Valley. In 2012, the department acquired the 1,155-acre Sulphur Springs Ranch adjacent to the park's southeastern boundary. Goals of the plan were identified at the beginning of the planning process. These goals have now been incorporated into the master plan amendment. They include connecting Sulphur Springs Ranch into the publicly accessible parkland by identifying areas for public use, such as trails, service roads, parking, staging, and backpack camping, relocating the backcountry camping sites listed in the 1993 master plan, or amending those, and then considering adding a backcountry toilet and a backpack campsite. During the planning process, the department conducted extensive public outreach. Input was gathered through stakeholder interviews, a community open house event, an online survey, a community meeting, and presentations to the Parks and Recreation Commission in May and October of 2019 and August 2020. And I will now turn it over to April Miller, who will present the draft recommendations.
Thank you, Kim. I will walk us through an overview of the draft recommendations. The master plan amendment makes recommendations for both remote camping facilities and trail improvements. We will start looking at the backpack camp recommendations and then move on to trail access and improvements. The master plan amendment has identified 2 locations for backpack camps within the park. Both locations are on the Sulphur Springs Ranch property at the east side of the park. The green hexagon shapes on the slide above indicate the locations within Sulphur Springs Ranch. Let's take a look at Sulphur Springs Ranch Backpack Camp first, and then at Valley Oak Backpack Camp second. The Sulphur Springs Ranch Backpack Camp is located on a hilltop site with gentle rolling topography and blue oaks. The Sulphur Springs Ranch Camp is an approximately 9-acre site, and camp improvements here include a vault toilet, 1 group campsite, and 6 individual campsites. There was strong community support for a remote backcountry toilet facility. The master plan amendment is recommending a prefabricated vault type toilet, single user waterless facility that will be ADA accessible. The photo on the left is the standard model, and on the right illustrates aesthetic material upgrades. Recommended amenities at each of the camp sites within the camp area include an embedded cook pad for camp stove use, a food locker, and log bench. Taking a look here at the typical campsite layout, there are 2 typical individual campsites, a 2-person campsite and a 4-person layout at the Sulphur Springs Ranch Backpack Camp area. There's an 8-by-8 foot area for the tent, as well as a cook pad and food locker in the 2-person campsite layout. And at the 4-person, we have a 12-by-12 foot tent area with log, cook pad, and bear locker. The group campsite will accommodate up to 10 individuals. The layout is circular in configuration. The cook pads and logs are at the center of the circle, and the food lockers and tents on the outside of the circle. Now we'll take a closer look at the second recommended camp location, the Valley Oak Backpack Camp. This camp area is located 1 mile east of the Sulphur Springs Ranch Backpack Camp area. It is more remotely set, positioned on a natural terrace on a steep hillside above Smith Creek, set amongst the Valley Oaks. The camp area is approximately a 2-acre site and will accommodate 5 individual campsites. These are to accommodate 4 people per reservation. The Valley Oak Backpack Camp amenities will include an embedded camp stove and, the cook pad for the camp stove and a food locker. The typical campsite layout is similar to what we saw at Sulphur Springs Ranch, where it has the 12-by-12 foot tent area, the cook pad, and the food locker. Now we will look at access and trail improvements to the backpack camps and the Sulphur Springs Ranch property. The existing park trail network and staging areas will provide access for both overnight and day use visitors to Sulphur Springs Ranch. Day use visitors are encouraged to make use of any staging area within the park. Overnight guest permit holders will use the existing Stockman's parking lot as the staging area. The existing ranch roads provided the backbone for the recommended trail network improvements at Sulphur Springs Ranch in the master plan amendment. Of the ranch roads that exist at the property, 3 miles are being repurposed as multi-use trails. Approximately 1 mile will be repurposed as a service road. 2 miles will be decommissioned. In addition to the existing ranch roads that will be repurposed and or decommissioned, there will be 2 miles of new trail constructed. The recommendation is to fully implement the trails, camps, and vault toilet within one single phase, as will be most efficient and cost effective. However, the master plan amendment identifies 4 phases of construction if this is not possible. Careful sequencing of construction phasing has been considered so as to provide the greatest amount of public access to the ranch as soon as possible. Phase 1 would include Sulphur Springs Ranch backpack camp and trails. Phase 2, access and trail up the Isabel Ridge. Phase 3, extension of the Manzanita Trail from Grant Park into Sulphur Springs Ranch property. And Phase 4, trail and Valley Oak backpack camp. Total for phases 1 through 4 is approximately 1.9 million. Approximate cost of just phase 1 is just under 1 million. Now I'll hand the presentation back to Kim to discuss environmental review.
Thank you, April. The department completed an initial study, mitigated negative declaration, and mitigation monitoring and reporting plan in compliance with CEQA. After analysis of the project, the Parks Department determined that the project could be fully mitigated to a less than significant level. During the public review period, 1 comment letter was received from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. They requested clarification on the impacts to biological resources and associated mitigation measures. This has been addressed in the revised ISMND and MMRP. And then next steps. So we will be finalizing the master plan amendment, and we present to the Board of Supervisors January 2021, and then prioritize the project phases against our other CIP priorities in the department, conduct surveys in the regulatory permitting, and then design and construction. And this concludes staff presentation. We're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of comments. Supervisor Simitian, after you.
I'm good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I often say my father-in-law said it was a sad day when you didn't learn something. I learned 2 things today. 1, backcountry toilets. I now know what that phrase means. And I also learned that there's bear-resistant food lockers. There's not bear-proof food lockers. So I appreciate that education. I want to thank you all for what you've done. Every 10 years or so, park measures go on the ballot and they get 75, 80% approval. Library measures go on the ballot and they get 75, 80% approval. I won't bring up VTA, Supervisor Simitian, but the library and the parks are loved by the people. And what you're starting to develop now, and I realize it'll take a few years, but you can't make something happen if you don't start. What you're starting right now looks absolutely wonderful. Enhancing our parks that are already overwhelmingly loved by the people that use them, making them even better. Don, I just want to say to you and the others here today, thank you. Thank you on behalf of the people of Santa Clara County for making our parks, which are already world-class and loved, even better. It just keeps getting better. Thank you all very, very much. I have nothing else on this, Supervisor Simitian. It's received the item is all we need to do. If you have no further comments, we'll consider this item received. We handled the remaining items already through consent. That leaves us to adjournment to January 21st, January 21 of the year 2021 at 10 o'clock. And I wish you all a happy and healthy holiday. Thank you for all that you've done during these super trying times, the last 9 months. I am happy to say it will be myself and Supervisor Simitian that will be on the Hewlett Committee for 2021. Thank you all. Does anyone else have anything else to say?
Excuse me, Chair, through the chair, it's actually forwarding a positive recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Does that change?
No, it has not changed. You are received.
I'm happy to, for the record, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to formally move approval.
Thank you, and forward to the Board of Supervisors. All right, and they better like this. I'll second that motion. Thank you very much, and we'll consider that, Colin, if it's okay with you, to be received unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, and with that, I thank you all. Happy holidays, stay well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.